My first encounter with Mulkeepmo came because of this photo, although I didn't know it at the time. It's one of the first images I remember seeing when I started working here 10 years ago. There wasn't much information with it, and I puzzled over what it could be. Was it a bridge? Was it something for irrigation? It was so strange, I about decided that it wasn't local. Years later, as I was working with the Maudine Sanders collection, I came across this photo. As soon as I saw it, I immediately connected it to my puzzle image. Turns out it was a trestle at one of the lime kilns in Johnson. Tram cars of limestone were transported along it to the top of the kiln where the rock was burned down to make limestone, or quicklime rather. The trestle was blown down during a mighty windstorm in January 1909. And the reason I know about this is because Mulkeepmo wrote about it. So, Mulkeepmo is Marion Mason. He was named after Marion Steele, the doctor who delivered him in 1875. In 1882, he saw the area's first balloon ascension, which was staged near the Mason home. The balloon was made from specifications gleaned from Civil War documents. It didn't go very high, but it scared a lot of folks. As a child, Mason visited the Pea Ridge battlefield. In later years, his niece, Bonnie Hanks, said that he found mini balls there and saw clothing in trees. Mully's parents were John Ewing Mason and Betty Ruth Cox Mason. They had 2 children, Marion and Maud. John was a farmer and at one point was said to own over 800 acres in and around Johnson. He worked at various jobs, including building the Baptist church there and railroad trestles up in Benton County. Mason was a great reader. Judging by the books on his bookcase, he was a fan of Westerns and Native American adventure tales. He was active in the Johnson community. He was a member of the Baptist church and a strong proponent of the Sunday school, which we'll come across later on in the program. He was also a member of the Anti-Horse Thief Association, which was a vigilance committee focused on thwarting horse theft and other crimes. Like many men in Johnson, Marion held a number of jobs. He taught at area schools, including Stony Point. He worked as a miller at the Johnson Mill and also as a grain broker. And in the 1920s, he worked as a bookkeeper for Charlie Diven's canning factory. He was interested in politics. In 1908, Mason was nominated for the state senate by the Republicans of Washington County. 4 years later, he ran as the Progressive Party candidate for Washington County Sheriff. He didn't win either race. In 1893, when he was about 18 years old, Mason became the Johnson correspondent for the Springdale News, a position he held for 40 years. A 1910 newspaper article said this about Mason. Having been reared in the vicinity from which he writes, Mr. Mason is thoroughly acquainted with the people, their traditions and characteristics, and is able to write interestingly of many things that would pass unnoticed by others. In 1896, he won a gold watch as the best news correspondent of the year. Now here's a draft for one of his columns, which includes a poem. He enjoyed writing poetry, and you'll hear some of it today. I'll leave you to judge his talent. Mason was a big promoter of the news. In 1910, he wrote a note to editor J.P. Stafford. Please find herewith a couple of very interesting postals. This is the baby at our house, Burrell Miller Hanks, little son of my sister. He's just beginning to talk and is going to be a great rustler for the news. Uncle had quite a time getting nephew to pose. In 1906, the Correspondents Association was formed with Marion Mason as president. It was the custom for correspondents to have pen names. In 1900, his fellow correspondents were Leonidas, Dewey, Menendez, Traveler, Octavius, Nob, I.C. Fun, and Wobby-Tob. Mason's pen name of Mulkeepmo comes from a character in The Cabin in the Clearing, A Tale of the Frontier. This was a novel written by Edward Sylvester Ellis in 1890. One of the main characters in it was a Miami Indian warrior by the name of Mulkeepmo, which, according to the author, meant the rattlesnake. Marion also worked for the Washington County Review under the pen name Peaklum, which is Mulkeepmo backwards. In 1889, the newspaper held a subscription contest amongst the correspondents. First prize went to Mulkeepmo for signing up 966 subscribers. He won a sewing machine, which was used by his sister and his nieces. After his big win, he wrote about a visit from a fellow correspondent. Dewey was out from Fayetteville last Wednesday evening, and made Mully a visit. Come again, Dewey, and bring those pants and get him mended on that sewing machine. Besides writing, Mason's other passion was photography. He loved Kodaking, calling it a pleasing and inexpensive fad. He began taking photos in 1908. He was an amazing amateur photographer, and here we see some of his images that he hung on the wall of his sister's home where he lived. He developed film and printed his own pictures. At first he shot on large-scale glass plate negatives. Later he moved to acetate film stock. Many of Mason's pictures were printed on postcards and given away or mailed to friends and family. Here's what he wrote on the back of this picture. "No, it is not a view of Sitting Bull, 'tis me boss. He had an explosion with the gas lighting plant at B.F. Johnson's home and was burned severely about head and face." Mason lived with his sister Maud and her family, where he was known as Uncle Jing. The Hanks and the Mason families were quite close. Bert and Maud had 5 children, and we'll see a lot of them during today's program. And later on, I'll share their interesting histories with you. The Hanks' home was located in the heart of Johnson, near the depot, the school, the stores, the lime plants, and the mill. A perfect spot from which to gather news and to take photographs. Mason had a quirky sense of humor. He referred to Johnson as the reservation and the Hanks' home as the wigwam. Animals were members of the squirrel tribe, the canine tribe, and the like. For today's program, I thought it would be fun to pair Mully's photos along with news items from his columns, dating from 1900 to 1911. They're in no particular order, just like his columns. And even though we're focusing on Johnson, you'll get a sense of what life was like for many small rural communities in northwest Arkansas. So if you're ready, we're going to head into Johnson of long ago. A whole lot of prominent visitors were rusticating in Johnson Sunday. A couple of years from now, why, Montenay will just be a slideshow for the big circus, the future metropolis of Johnson. The cool wave came along just as Dick Licklider shaved his mustache. And say, Dick looks like a picture of John Tyler, who was one of our presidents a long time ago. Uncle Ben Johnson of this place was one of a party who journeyed out to Colorado during the Pikes Peak gold excitement before the Civil War. The school enumeration of this district, number 109, shows a total of 128 persons, ranging from 6 to 21 years of age. Frank Gully, the Ozark lime magnate, was in Johnson Saturday looking after minor details of the immense business now being transacted. 7 cars of lime were billed out for shipment from this place. The nice warm weather of last Sunday brought out quite a crowd of loafers who watched the evening train pass through Johnson. Folks are still complaining of rats and mice, most especially the rats, whose dainty appetites are being sated on spring chickens, whose short careers are being ended long before they attain to frying size. Mason was quite poetic when it came to death. Another link in our chain of friendship was broken last Thursday evening when the long suffering of our friend and former schoolmate, Mrs. Annie Bucher, was ended by the pallid hand of death, lifting the veil of eternity and wafting her tired spirit to that bourne beyond the grave. She was buried Saturday evening in the Stookie Cemetery after appropriate services by Reverend G.P. Hanks. Local Lodge number 58 of the Anti-Horse Thief Association was organized here Saturday. This is a grand organization, and petty thievery and outlawry of all kinds receive the attention of the members, who cooperate with the officers of the law in bringing all offenders to justice. Loy Cox, little son of Sam Cox, is seriously ill with a bad attack of typhoid fever. The Frisco trains are a source of great deal of aggravation since they have been running so irregular of late. Nearly every passenger train is from half an hour to 4 hours late. There's been lots of ice on Clear Creek during the past 2 weeks, and the youngsters have had plenty of sport skating. Mr. John Cox met with an accident while working at the Sligo Mills at the Y Friday morning, whereby he broke his right arm 4 inches below the shoulder. The hurt will be very slow and painful in healing on account of the muscles on the arm being bruised by the heavy timber which struck him. A big lot of worthless dogs are ripening around here for future raids on the flocks of local sheep raisers. The farmers along the Clear Creek Valley suffered a great loss from the recent big floods, many tons of hay, shocks of wheat, and oats having been swept away. So it's time for a Mully poem. They're going to harvest the fields to help reap Kansas wheat. They're riding out of Johnson on a Frisco cushioned seat. A few may save their wages, but more will journey back to Johnson, and they'll get here by walking Frisco track. Ed Wright, the Harmon cattle buyer, bought a heifer here a short time ago and journeyed up to get her. But the frisky critter had collided with a Frisco freight a few days before, and now Ed has a claim against the railroad for 1 dead cow. Charles Mays, the Frisco agent, is preparing to quit the use of tobacco. The new rules against the use of tobacco by employees while on duty goes into effect this week, and Charlie will try chewing gum. 2 of the leading fox hunters of Benton County came down last week and spent several days with Uncle Ben Johnson, who is the dean of the local fox hunters. They are organizing and now number quite a clan who value the trained foxhound as being far above the station of other breeds of the canine tribes. There are no local Easter services, but the young folks had several egg roasts at various places on Saturday night. Folks are wanting a general stock law and at the same time are breaking the hog law, which prohibits hogs, sheep, and goats to run at large. But we're not complaining, since so many big things are looming just ahead of Johnson. A canning factory, a cold storage, a new railroad, etc. So bring on your old general stock law. We'll all be riding in horseless carriages and using dairy milk in a year or so. And that was written in 1906. Mulkeepmo is very proud of a Kodak snapshot that he secured a few days ago. 'Tis of our 2 oldest citizens, Uncle Bob Greathouse and Professor G.W. Stuckey, who were captured while riding together in a buggy. Uncle Bob Greathouse is talking book agent talk to Johnson folks at present and is landing several subscribers to his great literary wonders. Mason often took his readers to task about attending Sunday school. Here's what he wrote in 1906. We found what is troubling so many of our folks and keeps them away from Sunday school. It is a terrible disease called morbus sabbaticus and is very prevalent here at the present. The attack comes on suddenly every Sunday, and the victim suffers until Monday morning when he seemingly recovers. It never lasts longer than 24 hours and only keeps his victims from attending church or Sunday school. The Johnson Kodak Club is way behind with orders for views of the big train wreck that occurred here at Johnson 2 weeks ago. The pictures were secured a short time after the wreck and before the coming of the great multitude of sightseers. Sunday was a raw, sleety day and was followed by a cold night. The bird and rabbit hunters enjoy such weather, but those luckless individuals whose fuel supply is limited see no pleasure in this wintry weather. Miss Bernice Hanks is suffering from typhoid, but is getting along nicely. In later years, her sister Bonnie remembered that their mother made custard and ice cream for Bernice every day while she was ill. A number of Stony Point farmers are going to try cantaloupe growing this season. Cutworms, tater bugs, weeds, and other pests are making work aplenty for local gardeners. Map agents, Syrian peddlers, and patent medicine vendors are nearly as pestiferous. A big black wolf has been seen by several parties over in the Clear Creek Hills. Come and catch him if you want him. The heavy thunderstorm that visited this section Saturday evening was accompanied by quite an unusual lot of electricity. A bolt of lightning struck in John Looper's field near Stony Point and stunned 4 or 5 people who were setting out berry plants. Joseph Ellis, our cunning old Scotchman, is getting more feeble as the days shorten and has long since abandoned the idea of going home to Scotland. So a little bit about Ellis. He was a Civil War veteran, having served with the 19th U.S. Infantry out of Detroit. He was stationed in Fayetteville when he was discharged. He stayed and became the first postmaster of Johnson. When Joe Ellis died in 1910, Mully wrote his obituary. He was struck by a southbound freight train on the crossing at the depot platform and killed instantly. Joe's sight and hearing being very deficient, he started across the track and probably never realized his danger, as the wind was blowing a gale of dust and the approaching engine was making but little noise. For a generation, he has been a familiar figure here, and far-off folks who read his lines will pity the cruel fate of their Uncle Joe. Captain William Mays attended the picnic at Sun's Chapel Saturday and opened the campaign by making a public announcement of his candidacy for county seat of the Republican ticket. Mrs. William Mays seldom visits away from Johnson longer than a day at a time, but the unusual occurred a short time ago, and she visited up at Lowell 2 days, and we failed to make mention of it. The oversight was unintentional, but if you want to see all the items, why, you'll have to tell Mully a few of those that you know. A cat has 9 lives, and Hugh Licklider and a gun has been trying to add up the full score for a certain old black marauding feline who acts very naughty and refuses to stay still long enough for Hugh to shoot him more than once at a time. John Boswell was presented with a fine lantern by McClendon and Company. The lantern had been on exhibition at the store during the preceding week, and each of the locals had been allowed one free estimate on the probable length of the lantern burning after being lighted. The lantern was lighted Friday evening and burned exactly 24 hours and 30 minutes. Some of the fisher folks are complaining of a fish shortage down at Clear Creek and lay the cause to the sawdust that is thrown into the creek from several sawmills along the way. The orange tree at Parson Hank's house was purchased from a seedsman up in Illinois and was quite a good-sized little shrub when Mr. Hanks bought it. So on the back of this postcard, Molly wrote a poem, of course. This is our little orange tree, 5 years old. It has 28, all as yeller as gold. Ben Johnson Jr. sold a milk cow for the sum of $100. Charlie Davis was the purchaser. Mr. Davis is in the dairy business, and this cow will be quite an addition to his herd, as tests show that she will average 22 pounds of butter per week. She is of no fancy-blooded strain, just a common cow. Mason was a big town booster, and you see that a lot in his columns. Berry blossoms are coming a-humping, and local folks are building castles in the air on the strength of the prospect of a record-breaking crop. Scouts are out soliciting and cajoling folks to come where the biggest berries grow, which is here at Johnson, of course. Superintendent Jess Horn wants us to say that there is plenty of room at Johnson for a whole lot more people to attend Sunday school. Are you coming this Sunday morning? Folks in Johnson were constantly on the move, leaving for work and new opportunities, and then coming back to Johnson and then leaving again. J.B. Vernon left today for Portales, New Mexico. John has been back here several weeks looking after his berries and closing up his business affairs so that he can give his entire attention to his new farm. John likes Arkansas yet, because they say he still had his head and shoulders out of the rail car window way up north of Johnson, way up north of Garfield, looking back towards Johnson. Bless the lime kilns. When newsy items are scarce, there is always something to say about them. The lime kilns are doing a big business again, and several cars of the celebrated product of the Clear Creek lime bluffs go out daily to the markets of the Northwest. Folks would be surprised to know the amount of lime shipped from Johnson in the course of a year, for there are 8 large kilns located here now. Possums are pretty numerous, and a good possum dog commands a premium now that the hunting season has opened. Do you know that people come from miles around to get loads of sand along Clear Creek? The sand is used for building purposes, and the reservation affords about the only pure article that can be found in a big streak of the territory. Mason was as poetic about Civil War veterans as he was about death. Memorial Day services were held at the National Cemetery in Fayetteville. These sad spring days bring solemn thoughts to those of us who watch the limping march of the few gray heads who make this yearly pilgrimage to garland the graces of their dead comrades. So few of us appreciate these old fellows who linger yet. The farmers are jubilant over the prospect for a corn crop since the rains sped the drought away. We're still concerned with those rains today. John Cox and family came up from Vail Saturday to attend the picnic, but the train was so late that the best of the doings, the big free-for-all dinner on the grounds, was over before they got to the scene of the action. Deputy Sheriff Licklider discovered a suspicious-looking box among the shipments received at the depot last Thursday. He notified Sheriff Reed of the probability of it being a liquor consignment. So Thursday night, Sheriff Reed and Deputy Carson came out with a search warrant, and a raid was made on said box. The contents consisted of 48 pint bottles. They were duly seized and freighted down to Fayetteville, where they were Carrie Nationized Saturday afternoon. You all know that. The consignment was billed to Thomas Dot, which is one of the several names used by Fayetteville liquor sellers. This crusade against whiskey is likely to put Johnson very much out of the good graces of the parties who have been shipping the stuff through here for the past dozen years. Angora goats are great animals to destroy undergrowth and thereby save many a stroke of scythe and mattock, but just let them get loose in a young orchard. Uncle Ben Johnson has a fine flock of the handsome creatures, and he sheared a splendid lot of fine mohair from them yesterday. Yes, mohair, that's what they call it, instead of wool. This is a forlorn-looking old place now, and a fit abode for all sorts of hobgoblins and haunts. After a long absence, I wandered by there the other day, and the old tumble-down dwelling little resembled the trim-looking log home of the early 1880s. While Clear Creek was getting on her pantaloons last Friday evening, she hitched onto the big trestle on the Fayetteville Lime Works and washed away one lower section on the south side of the creek. There is abundance of water power now for all milling purposes, and the steam plant at the roller mill is enjoying a rest. Miss Nancy Smith of Arlington, Alabama, arrived here Sunday evening. She was rather advanced in age and had never traveled before and bought a ticket in Alabama that brought her to Van Buren, Arkansas. She wanted to go to a little inland town, Yale, in Johnson County, but the Van Buren agent misunderstood and sold her a ticket to Johnson. The mistake was not noticed by Miss Smith until she arrived here and could not find anybody who could tell her of her relatives. She left today for Fayetteville on her way to Pettigrew, which is the nearest railroad point to the little village where her relatives reside. 3 fine Angora goats from B.F. Johnson herd were shipped today to an Oklahoma gentleman who wanted high-grade animals, which is what they get when we're ordering from the several swine, sheep, and cattle raisers of Washington County. The Stony Point rural telephone line will be in operation in a few days, and there will be 13 phones on the new line, including Bob Greathouse. Bennett Maxey is learning the various calls now by means of an old alarm clock, which he winds up and manipulates. Dick Licklider, John Mason, and Bert Johnson left yesterday for a sojourn of several days out in Madison County, where they intend to play havoc with the squirrel tribe. C.W. Davis is on the warpath. Claude has a fine lot of hogs down at his place and a big bunch of fancy pigs. During the past 2 weeks, 10 pigs have disappeared, 1 and 2 at a time. It may be a hungry red fox, for there's lots of the cunning critters near here, and a plump pig makes a fine catch. Or it may be some light-fingered fellow who is prowling nocturnally. They're telling that the relatives of a Johnson girl and the relatives of a young Johnson man got together Saturday and debated for several hours on what to do about it. The girl and the young man are in love, they can't afford to marry, and the conference was called for the purpose of finding out if there was any way to marry them off or check their worthlessness while in love. The mother of the girl said her daughter wasn't much use around the house now as she was when she was 4 years old, and the father of the young man held his head all evening and groaned. Muskrats and crawfish undermined and weakened one of the mill pond levees so that the water overwhelmed the excavated embankment and opened quite a crevasse through which the waters rushed last Thursday night. The levee has been repaired and active warfare is being waged between Uncle Ben Johnson and the muskrat and crawfish tribes. The Children's Day exercises at the Johnson Sunday School were attended by quite a lot of visitors who enjoyed the program exceedingly well. The little folks who were such splendid entertainers had only about 10 days to prepare for their program. Uneasy rests the head of the farmer as holding his wheat for $1 a bushel, for the market is tumbling day by day, and the consumer who has to buy his flour is easier since prospective famine prices are no longer expected. The old swimming holes are great attractions for the youthful silents, especially when folks are supposed to be attending Sunday school or church. Freight number 34 met with a serious disaster. The train was speeding down grade at a 50-mile clip when the forward trucks of a refrigerator car jumped the tracks. The wheels bumped along the ties for a couple hundred feet, then the car turned end over end and landed topside down. 7 more cars tumbled along, tearing up 100 feet of track. A tramp was riding in one of the cars, and the fellow was scared into 47 fits, but was not injured. And this present taste of winter has spoiled tempers here today, for there's grumbling and complaining about the weather's changeful way. That wasn't an earthquake last Friday evening, but it was one of the largest blasts ever put off at the lime quarries here. The charge consisted of several hundred sticks of dynamite, all fired at once. Enough rock was displaced to furnish work for quite a while. Dick Licklider and wife went out to Harris today. Dick intends to spend several days fishing and hunting, trying to rest up from his arduous labor in the local blacksmith shop, where he has been pounding away for so many years that folks have quit trying to remember how long. The basket supper Thanksgiving night was a grand success. The sum of $41 was realized from the sale of 35 baskets, 4 cakes, and 1 pie, an average of more than $1 each. This sum will be used to purchase more books for the Johnson School Library. The mouse and rat plague is now followed by another aggravating annoyance, which is an overabundance of chiggers and mites. W.L. Stuckey is spending the week here at his country home looking after the fine apple crop on his Ferndale plantation. Quite a change has been wrought on this farm, which a few years ago was one of the old worn-out places, but will now rank among the best and most productive ranches of the county. A young lad named Harry Daunt burglarized the Ozark store Sunday night. He carried away about $50 worth of cutlery, notions, etc. He went to a railroad car on the sidetrack, and the occupants, some hobo berry pickers, were awakened. They questioned him about what he had in his sack and accused him of robbing the local store. He denied the accusation but did not stay long there, as the hobos were threatening to take him up. After he left the boxcar, they held a caucus and decided that it would be best to inform Hugh Licklider, the manager, of their suspicions. Deputy Sheriff Dick Licklider soon found the young hopeful. He led his captors to the place where most everything was recovered. The boy was taken to Fayetteville, where he languishes in the county jail. In 1910, Fayetteville had a serious problem with its water supply. Contractor Powers has been using a house-moving outfit to get the big pump station boiler over from the Crescent Lime Kiln spur to the water plant on Clear Creek. As soon as this boiler is placed in position, the work on the pump station will go forward in a big hurry. The boiler house is being prepared and the pipeline is about laid, so it will be only a short time until Clear Creek water will be supplied to Fayetteville folks. Miss Fannie Nail and Brother Tom were attending the arithmetic school, which is being taught at Zion. The Stony Point folks are raising the funds to purchase an organ for the Sunday school. Arthur Smith is the superintendent of the school down there, and he reports a fair attendance every Sunday. Now here at Johnson, why it seems as if folks are lax about coming out to Sunday school. Are you coming out next Sunday? The little folks are buzzing round because school begins next Monday, and Miss Mary is going to teach. Miss Mary Craig is principal, and Miss Addie Lynch is assistant teacher. The Frisco has placed a set of telegraph instruments in the Johnson Depot, and the local agent's knowledge of telegraphy is severely taxed to keep up with the mystic language of the clattering sounder. The roads are in splendid condition now. The cordwood haulers are taking every advantage of the situation and are piling wood in the yards of the local lime plants. A split switch derailed the rear sleeper of the Texan passenger train last Friday morning. The main line and the switch tracks were both obstructed by the heavy Pullman car. The extra gang and section men got the car on track a little after noon, and it was taken down to Fayetteville for repairs. No one was hurt. Although he doesn't say it in his column, I think that Mully witnessed the very first airplane flight in Washington County in 1911. The Washington County Fair had a big attendance from Johnson, and a number of the local exhibitors won high honors on their cattle, hogs, fruit, etc. The airship man's flights were most attractive feature of the fair, and aviator Martin and his Curtiss biplane caused many folks to make several visits down there. Postmaster Hanks desires to call attention to the practice of some patrons of placing loose coins in their boxes each time they desire to dispatch letters, instead of supplying them with postage stamps in advance of their needs. This practice imposes undue hardship on the rural carrier and delays them on the service of their rounds. So please, buy some stamps. The Stony Point people have been wanting to build a new schoolhouse, but various causes deter them from doing so this season. So the next term of school will be taught in the same old building, and this was one of the schools where Marion Mason taught at. A general talk-it-up time is looking for at Sunday school, when folks are expected to decide about the happenings of a Christmas tree here at Johnson. And now, O ye scribes, abstain from the habit of calling this coming Christmas the heathenish name of Xmas. Yes, Colonel W.L. Stuckey has bought 6 hound pups and intends to make Ferndale's the headquarters for fine hounds in this section of the county. Ben Johnson, Jr. and N.V. Hanks went up to Lowell yesterday to make apple barrels for Pritchard and Gillette of Springdale. Born to Mr. and Mrs. N.V. Hanks on Thursday, April 15th, a son who has been christened Burrell Miller Hanks. W.C. Haynes is building a couple of boats. They will be placed on the fish ponds for the use of the many pleasure seekers who visit Johnson nowadays. Honorable R.H. Clayton and wife of Elm Springs were guests of Captain G.P. Hanks and wife Saturday evening and Sunday. Uncle Bob is the postmaster of his town and is a great crony of Uncle Green, who presides over the local post office. Uncle Sam has no helpers more loyal and true than them 2 old fellows who wore the blue and followed the flag through Dixie so many years ago. There'll be no spring poetry composed by Mulkeepmo while he has to wear his winter clothing. Just as I tune up, why another cold wave comes sweeping down over the Ozarks. Some folks are a-grievin' about too much rain, they say, for Clear Creek's been rampaging and washing things away. That heavy rain last Friday night brought the usual results to the lower plant of the Ozark Lime Works, where the flood got over the floors of the lime sheds and destroyed about 150 barrels of lime. Gid Licklider and family were down from Springdale Sunday visiting relatives. Gid is courting Dame Fortune to turn the voters of Springdale town to look towards his manly breast, where there is ample room to pin the marshal's badge if the city voters will elect him. C.S. May started to plant corn today with a tricky old planter. It will be a hard job for the newly elected Sunday school superintendent to find suitable language to express his thoughts and feelings when he finds no corn in the ground after driving halfway across the field. The public school at Johnson opened yesterday morning with a fairly good enrollment. There's a great need for a compulsory education law, for there is no excuse to keep a pupil from attending as good a school as our local school. Fishing time brings on the fever, so we rig up lines and hooks, dig some bait, and sneak off quickly to Old Clear Creek's cozy nooks. J.E. McClendon is suffering from a very severe attack of measles. His many friends trust that John will stand the siege patiently and soon be back again at the Ozark store. Abe Nickum, the Springdale house mover, was in Johnson last week, engaged in moving the Hanks store building across lots to the rear of the Ozark store, where Mr. McClendon is going to rearrange and make a dwelling house of the noted Hello building. So Bert's dad, the Reverend Green Pickney Hanks, operated the Hello General Store, and according to Don Bailey, one Halloween the local boys painted out the O in the sign. The good Reverend was mad, but his wife thought it was funny. And in this photo, it does look like the O is a different paint job, doesn't it? Aunt Mary Pearson made a misstep early Sunday morning while preparing breakfast and fell from her rear kitchen door almost 2 feet to the ground and received injuries which will confine her closely for 6 weeks or more. The dry weather is having a telling effect on local springs and wells, and many report a lower water supply than for many years. Father Smith does the Rural Mail Route Act for his son Arthur most of the time, while Arthur humps the farm work along. John Starnes and family came in yesterday morning from Chelsea, Indian Territory, and will visit a few days with relatives here. They resided here several years ago, but have sojourning out in the oil and gas region for some time. So sometimes Mason's sentences were as long and complicated as any written by novelist William Faulkner. This is 2 sentences. The first one's short, and the other one is the big one. There was a hot time in the old town last Friday night while the big possum hunt was in progress along the Clear Creek hills. 9 possums were captured, while 2 more were treed, and one big genuine coon had been surprised while on a marauding tour and had sought shelter in a great big tree. But the possum hunters were not to be defeated by any ordinary coon, so a fire was built, and after a great deal of chopping, the tree was felled, and the coon made a wild break to escape through the big bunch of hunters. And for a few minutes there was a grand mix-up of hunters, dogs, and coon, but the unequal contest soon ended in grand victory for the hunters. A wagon load of Johnson folks journeyed over to Obie Moore's a few evenings ago. Mully was along and nailed 9 deer at one shot with a Kodak. Mr. Moore has quite a deer park down here south of Johnson, and the deer are fine specimens of the black-tail kind. He brought the original pair from Nevada, and the old male now wears a magnificent spread of antlers. Billy wanted to be quite friendly and was bent on investigating the workings of my Kodak, so I got several fine snaps of him. Mully often talked to other correspondents through his columns. In this one, he's talking to Old Timer. Old Timer, you better make a date with Mully before you come out, for watermelon are rather scarce on the reservation. We'll save some big uns and look for you if you'll tell us when. Postmaster Hanks says that he caught a Marconigram today which said, "Great excitement in London. King Edward wants a big red apple, and wireless messages are flying out from the Atlantic to hasten that consignment from Johnson, Arkansas." Death sent his messages for so many of our friends this past year. After life's fitful fever, they now sleep in their narrow homes. We leave these friends and mark the end of their earthly pilgrimage and turn to wonder what the days of the new year holds in store for Johnson and the people of Clear Creek Valley. Well, I can tell you a little bit about what a century of New Year's held in store for Johnson and its people. Several of the buildings and places that Mully photographed in the early 1900s are still with us today. The Hanks home and 2 nearby houses, the railroad trestle across Clear Creek, the Licklider General Store and Post Office, Ben Johnson's home, the Johnson Mill, the mill pond, which supplied water to the mill, the rock wall along the main street, and the lime quarries. Over the years, the Hanks family grew and prospered. Bert and Maud married in 1897 after a 5-year courtship. At first, they lived in a little log cabin on Bert's father's farm near Stony Point. Then in 1905, they bought the house in Johnson, where they raised 5 children. Bert was a farmer. He ran cattle, had strawberries, milked cows, a home orchard, horses, and a mule. Maud loved to garden as well. Bert was also a cooper and a carpenter, making lime and apple barrels and berry crates. He traveled all over Benton and Washington counties and up into Kansas on jobs. Bert and Maud's first child was Bess, born in 1899. She was a school teacher in Johnson. In 1921, she married Tom Farish. They lived near Stony Point on a 40-acre farm where they grew apples, cherries, Concord grapes, strawberries, corn, beans, and tomatoes. Tom started a small tomato canning factory in 1930 and later went into canning in a big way with his good friend Joe Steele of Springdale. And together they built the Lowell Canning Factory. In 1935, the family moved to Lowell, where Tom served as mayor. Bess and Tom had 2 children, Maudine and Thomas Marion, named after his uncle, or his great-uncle, rather. Maudine followed in her great-uncle's footsteps by joining the staff of the Springdale News in 1948. Eventually, she became the women's editor, and was a part owner of the newspaper. She was a board member of the Shiloh Museum and donated many of the photos that you're seeing today. Blanche was born in 1901. She married Lester Elliott in 1922 and graduated from the University of Arkansas a few years later. She was a home demonstration agent in several Arkansas counties, including Benton. Blanche and Lester had a farm at Mount Comfort, where they raised turkeys, sheep, and cattle. In 1953, they bought the old Sylvanus Blackburn home and farm at War Eagle. A year later, Blanche founded the Ozark Arts and Crafts Fair, now called the War Eagle Fair. It was the first of its kind in Arkansas. She wanted to give traditional Ozark artists and crafters a place to display and sell their wares. Her daughter Shirley ran the fair for many years, and it's still going strong today. Bernice was born in 1904. She was quite a musician. Her teacher, Anna Goodman, would walk about 6 miles from Johnson to teach her. Her sister Bonnie said that her piano playing was a source of enjoyment both to her family and her community. Bernice was also very skilled at needlework. And you see the dress that she's wearing in this photo? We actually have it on display today, and you're welcome to come up afterwards and look at it. It's very pretty. Bernice married Edmund Bailey in 1930. Edmund held several jobs. Among them, in the 1930s, he was the gravel inspector for the State Road Department when they were building Highway 71. Later, the family moved to Oklahoma, where Edmund was a bookkeeper-accountant for the Stillwell Canning Company. 3 of their 7 children, Don, Bill, and Jean, have contributed hundreds of images to the collection, and they're with us today. Burrell was born in 1909. When he was a child, he nearly died of kidney disease. He was a big radio buff, and Don tells me that he built a radio in part by wrapping copper wire around an oatmeal box and placing the antenna in a tree outside the window of the house. Once he broadcasted his sister Bernice singing and playing the piano. One day the FCC paid a surprise visit because of his illegal broadcast signals. He had to dismantle his setup. Burrell wanted to join the Signal Corps but was declined from service because of his bad teeth. Instead, he worked as a train brakeman in California for the Santa Fe Railroad. One night in 1941, he was accidentally crushed and killed in the San Bernardino rail yards. The last child, Bonnie, was born in 1915. She first worked as a bookkeeper receptionist for Dr. R.T. Henry in Springdale. Bonnie joined the First National Bank in Springdale in 1943 as a teller bookkeeper. Eventually, she became vice president, working at the bank for 40 years. She was a charter member of the Business and Professional Women's Club and served on the boards of the Shiloh Museum and Stuckey Cemetery. Marion Mason suffered a stroke in the late 1920s. One side of his body was severely affected, as was his speech, but he had a sharp mind and still read the newspaper. In fact, no one in the family was allowed to touch it until after he was done with it. He kept up his correspondent work until 1933, when he became too ill to continue. His niece Bonnie continued in his stead. Maud cared for her brother in the Hanks home until his death in 1946. In 1909, Mason wrote, "Oh, Clear Creek hills, someday I know, The sun will shine no more for me. The light fade out, the night grow cold, and things that are will cease to be. But if from out horizons far my spirit earthward wanders near, straight unto you I'll take my way, O Clear Creek Hills, forever dear. Maud and Bonnie lived in the home until 1961. Then they moved to Springdale to be closer to Bonnie's bank. When it came time to clean out the house, a large trunk of glass plate negatives were left behind because the trunk was too heavy to move. So we're fortunate to have so many of Mason's photographs and negatives in the collection, but I know that there are more out there. So if any of you know about some, please tell me. So what do you think? Isn't this a gem of a collection? We are so lucky to have it and to be able to pair the images with that he took with his writings. Before I end, I want to leave you with one last poem. You've traveled near and far to hear tales about Johnson long ago. Thanks for spending your noon hour with me and my friend Mulkeepmo. Thank you.